I'm sure you can all agree, the pyramid isn't made of just blocks. You know, we know this, knowing humanity. We wouldn't build a pyramid of only blocks. I mean, we just wouldn't do that. We would backfill all the areas with sand or mud or whatever if we could get away with it. And we wouldn't quarry. First of all, we wouldn't even quarry blocks, okay? We wouldn't quarry blocks. We're accustomed to getting the masonry free from the well, so we wouldn't substitute that for quarrying, especially on a job this massive that we would benefit from. That's the wild card. Like if somebody offered a job, you know, like the contract of building a pyramid, the condition would be that I would use the masonry free from location. And if they said, oh, I got to quarry the blocks, I would turn down the job.
Then point and laugh at them for saying something so ridiculous.
I would not build one of these if I had to quarry the blocks from 100 miles away. Nobody would. Let's face it.
For example, this is the last time we've ever moved a megalithic block. I mean, we were so lazy, we made wheels, we drove it with gasoline and machines. It took 3 months to get it to 100 miles, or maybe 90.
3 kilometers an hour.
That would only have taken ancient Egyptians all week.
All the little spots that we don't need blocks for. And that, if we backfill the spots that don't need blocks, that means that the blocks, they're specific to the area where they're used. Now, they have 3 different types of stones here. They got basalt, they got granite, and then they got
limestone. All different types of materials coming out of the ground around here, if you know, just literally out of another well. Everything needed could have been found or made on location. Working with salt water here, you know, I mean, all the material for the rocks are available from their source. Pumice and granite is the same stuff. Pumice floats, but pumice and granite are the exact same. They just, one was cooled quickly and the other one was cooled slowly. So if you had the means of extraordinary heat, you could make them float. And I mean, let's face it, everything can float if you put enough air in it. And, you know, like, yeah, it seems more reasonable to, since we're getting the material from location, that we would make pumice. Not to mention that granite floats on basalt because of their different density, which could come in handy. Now, this is where it gets interesting, is that the limestone is used for cement. It's like super easy to make cement, and you know, it's calcium carbonate, mostly calcium carbonate, which is easy. They call it the fizzy rock because you can, you know, make it can fizzle, bubble. So it's reasonable to of a possibility to think that, you know, I would float the blocks. I would make them on location and I would float them. That's what I'm getting at.
So I guess I might have been the guy on this job. There's always a guy on a job that's like, man, this job is gonna take forever. This is bullshit. Hey, I got an idea. Why don't we like this? It'll be way easier and it might even be faster. That's. And then there's somebody that'll be like, yeah, that is way easier. That's way easier. That'll be faster too. Let's do it that way. That's way better.
And that's how we are. There's always somebody who's going to be like, you know, halfway through the project will be like, hey, I got a better idea because this is not sensible. And they come up with a smarter idea. Like, that's what we do.
And let's face it, if you can do something like this, I mean, you wouldn't even have to rely on bamboo or coconuts to in your mix to make your stones float.
You have to exhaust all reason and logic before we go into imaginative alternatives like giant sono levitation and aliens, you know. And I think people jump to that conclusion too quickly, and literally we haven't exhausted all reasonable logical potentials first,
which is definitely pumice.
So looking at this colossal job and knowing that people saw this as a valid expenditure of livelihood on their part and were honored to work on this and work their asses off to do this colossal job, you know that it really offered them a benefit in return. It wasn't just for one person's death. This was like a valid and you know, like it was a really, they were proud to work. Knowing that they achieved this colossal job, you know that they made it as easy as possible for themselves. You know, we don't want to carry a big block uphill. Maybe we'll kick a little block down the hill, but we're not going to carry a big block up the hill. We're just not going to do that. And so, so knowing this, and then looking at the different types of blocks they had the granite, they had the basalt, and then the limestone. Limestone didn't look too good.
But the granite and the first exterior row were perfectly smooth. Now, using 3 different types of stone is kind of a lot of work. That suggests that they might each have a specific attribute that the others don't have, or they would have just used a single stone and it was less work. Why work so hard for 3 different types of stone? We wouldn't use 3 different types of stone unless we really had to.
You know, this is a colossal job that they actually achieved the finished product. They got the end result that they wanted. That means that all these little architectural designs in here and every little block's type and setup is a clue to what this thing is it does and what was his why. They didn't just throw it together in any old way. You know, they were very mathematical, and so they wouldn't have just like, yeah, it's not just like thrown together in any old way. Every detail is very specific. So like this little shaft over here, right where the Grand Gallery meets the King's Chamber, that little shaft up here, or this little shaft right behind the door here that goes is in the King's Chamber almost. It's in the hallway there, and then like that's right. And then there's that shaft that goes from the Queen's Chamber all the way down to the subterranean chamber. Then looking at the descending passage, the one that goes down to the subterranean, and how it's shaped and the type of stones they used, in the King's Chamber, you know, the type of stones they used in the Queen's Chamber. Where were the really smooth stones and type of they used in these passages? All these details. Where were the really smooth ones? Why were they really smooth? Like they keep telling us, like, oh, they could fit these granite blocks perfectly together. You can't even fit a sheet of paper between them. Well, knowing humanity, we wouldn't do that for no reason. So there again, that's a specific clue on why would we do that? Why would we make sure that you can't fit a sheet of paper between them? Okay, this is I want to be able to look at these little doors to the Grand Gallery, how it's set up like this, and these little notches here, and why is there these why is there molted, bendy, bent up, burnt and molted chunks. Why did they have to fix the pyramid for so long? They fixed it here, they fixed it there. They patched up the Great Step. They patched up the granite plug. They patched up the cutout in the King's Chamber on one of the corners. They patched up so many things. What else did they patch up? Did they do stuff that wasn't there before even? They cleaned up so much and that now it's hard to see exactly what's worth reviewing, what's trustworthy, and what's not. But if we look closely, we can tell what's patched and what isn't. Quickly, I've got to point out the Assyrian, or I think it's called the Assyrian, where it's an older construction that's below the ground of these massive metallic blocks that has water there. Well, it's had water there forever. And they've tried to pump it out with a pump that just literally vacuums up water like no tomorrow. It's the best water pump in the world. And it wouldn't make a dent in it. The water just kept refilling itself. I'm talking I don't know, I'll show you, but it's 500 gallons a minute worth. That's right. Or something like that. Here, I'll put it on the wall. It literally just slurps up water like crazy, and yet it would just keep refilling itself. So, and it's a mystery. They don't know why the Assyrian keeps refilling so quickly, but it does, and so they can't drain it. They've tried for many years. Also, it's a little bit hot water too. It's like that. Then they don't know why it's hot water either. But regardless, this is, you know, important to the process that I'm going to get at, because other structures near these pyramids were involved in the process of helping out the offering the materials to their well, offering the water that was, or heating the water that it was being offered once it was active and ready to go.
So maybe not the Assyrian, but you know, other structures near on the Giza plateau that were underground were supplying the pyramid with its materials and you know, water and whatever kind of stuff that they want. So they were preheating it and things like that.
Now let me ask you something. Why would you, like, first of all, you'd have to have like some kind of a crucible, like a mold that you could pour your loaves of bread, or should I say blocks of sand, blocks of granite and blocks of, because you're making your own blocks, so you're going to need something to boil the material for your blocks into that can withstand those kind of heat, and which its interior is the dimensions of the size of blocks you want, that has a lid on it that can take that kind of pressure, that you can heat many, many times and cool many, many times, fast or slow, doesn't matter, because, you know, it'll have to be both, because you're going to be doing some sandstone, pumice, granite, right, like basically the outside, 4 inches of the outside of the block looks like granite, but the inside is still pumice sandstone.
Because you got that crucible glowing red hot.
And so it kind of, you know, it kind of burnt a crust onto the block, which would look like granite. Basically, that's the crust. It's like a vitrified glaze of granite, of sandstone. That looks like granite, but it's actually still pumice sandstone inside the block. And so, like the smooth granite finish is offered by the interior of the massive crucible. And so that's how you would get those blocks. And then the limestone would be, same thing. You just don't have to heat them up red hot to put a crust on it. You just boil it and flash cool it, because you want to make pumice out of it. So it's got to be flash cooled. So the best way to do that is when it's hot, you submerge the crucible in cold water, and boom, it'll steam really crazy. And then if you have your lid with air cavities inside of it so that it can float, then while you submerge the crucible, the lid will come off the water, out into the water, and then the pumice block that's inside will come out right after the lid lifts off, and it'll float right up to the top of the well, float right up to you. Doesn't that sound way easier than quarrying it from 100 miles away? Now, why would you need a vitrified glazed granite finish on a sandstone pumice block? Like, why would you want to have these perfectly geometrically flat and smooth faces that you can't even fit a sheet of paper between? Well, it's because when you put two faces like that together, water can't seep between them because of surface tension, and so it'll retain. If you can make sure that those two faces don't twist away from each other, and they just keep close to each other, then it'll retain water. You make a tier at a time, one tier at a time. You're always working on side. The well's in the center of the pyramid, and you make a pool, and you just manage pools all the way around, and you start with your granite rows on the exterior, the smooth. Make sure that they don't twist away from each other, and you just bring the pool up with you every time you finish a tier. You submerge stuff in the last tier's pool, and it'll bring the water up to the next pool, as long as you have your granite roll installed first. So you're doing one tier at a time. You're always basically you just bring the pool up with you. That's how you do it. And the blocks come up the well. You work off the trenches. It's sort of how I would do it. That's how I envisioned it, and that's how it would be done for me. I would just bring water up with me and float the blocks back and forth from the spot, right from the well. Like, if the finished product looks ridiculously massive and like a hard, impressive job,
I mean, two things. You know, we did it easier than what we're thinking, and that, you know, there was a major reason why it was this way. And I'm going to give sensibility to all of these so that there's no confusion. I'm sure everybody will agree. This will be so incredibly hard to dispute, which I encourage anybody to try. I don't care what major you're in or, like, you know, what expert you are in any field. If you want to dispute this this model of the pyramids, I encourage that, and please bring it on. It will be so difficult to do, though, I warn you, and in the end, it'll only help me and securing its validity a little more. So, you know, I encourage anybody to try, but it's going to be pretty hard to do, and it's going to be a short debate. But I'm going to cover all these, like why these massive blocks here, and why the stack of. Well, now there's the theory that they're floating blocks because they're pumice, and that they're using granite with the vacuum seal of the smooth finish. We can apply this in the review of what this pyramid possibly could do. So this brings me to the ascending passage. When you look at these granite plugs, they are perfectly geometric granite smooth. The rest of these tunnels aren't nice and smooth, but this one is, and so is the King's Chamber and the King's Chamber floor, which, if you look really closely at the King's Chamber floor, it's not connected to any of the sides of the room. It's not even seated at the elevation of the blocks of the rest of the room, like it's halfway up almost. Which makes me think that it's probably more like the top of an elevator, like it could be buoyant. So think desalination, distillation here. The steam comes from the subterranean chamber. It goes through these tiny little tunnels under pressure. And, you know, if it was steam, it could probably make it, like, all the way to the top of the King's Chamber, and these tiny little shafts, air shafts, would be, like, the exit. That's the only exit in the place, except for the front entrance, but I call that more like a pressure release valve, because you'd have water that would drown the bottom half of this pyramid, and because the steam has a free pass up. So by the time the steam gets out of these only steam comes out of these tiny little shafts. Now, if we look at the front entrance, it's just a little bit lower than the entrance to the Grand Gallery and the elevation of the Queen's Chamber passage, which means that if these three plugs, and they call them plugs, because they fit so perfectly in that shaft, which is so perfectly smooth as well, that if these plugs were buoyant, as we know that we're making rocks float here, as soon as the water got so high that it would spew out the front entrance, the water would rise these plugs and force air into the system, forcing the steam into the King's Chamber and out the little air shafts. Steam goes up, salt goes down. I'd figure that the Queen and the King's Chamber would be connected top to top, bottom to bottom, so that steam could be traded and water and salt could be traded. Steam goes up, salt goes down. That's the way. Now, when the water level starts to reach a certain height that it's starting to fill the Grand Gallery to the top, and maybe even the King's Chamber, now, those little shafts are only meant for steam, so they have this sarcophagus there that's lower than these air shafts, and if that room filled with water so much, because it does have drain holes, that means the pressure of water would be going in there so much that it would have to supersede the drainage that's already provided to fill that sarcophagi. And if they fill that little sarcophagi, that supersedes the pressure of the whole system, and then the elevator would drop. And as the elevator would drop, it would force all the steam down through the Queen's Chamber and down the Queen's Chamber passage, all the way into the Grand Gallery and up to the little shafts again. And at the same time, it would push those, those granite plugs back down towards the main entrance, which would squirt water out of the front entrance, leaving room for it to pressurize again, and then and then float back up, and they would just keep, like, you're pumping. It's like it's a pump. It's basically I would believe it's solar powered
steam hydro, thermal pump distiller, and it's basically like a pressure cooker distiller, right? Like, because that's what, this is, if you want more detail, there's more, but I'm sure any like thermal hydro engineer is already kicking themselves going, my God, why didn't I see it first? Because it's definitely all observable. It desalinates seawater into fresh water on a large scale. But if this was really a potential, like if it was potentially possible that it was doing this, I mean, it would have to be those are some pretty specific requirements that would need to be observable for it to remain a potential. Like are the blocks pumice?
I mean, there's no doubt these ones look pumiced. I mean, if there's bubbles like that all the way through these blocks, you'll float. Even this granite chunk here looks like it's got some air cavities in it as well. I found a video of some kid who climbed a pyramid and took a video of it, and so I thought I'd use that and maybe take a little gander at the tiers and see if I could spot some confirming evidence of pumice being used on the construction. And so join in with me and let's see if we can observe some pumice here. And I mean, there shouldn't just be one or two little weird looking blocks. I mean, do these blocks look like they're manufactured? Do they look homemade? Is there anything weird about these blocks? Do they look like they might have air cavities trapped in them? Do you figure that they might float? Is there a whole pile of them? Do some of them look like they might have like a vitrified rind or crust on the exterior of it that might hide the pumice, but the pumice would still be in the interior of the blocks? But regardless, there should be a lot of pumice observable if this was actually a potential. So yeah, let's do this together and see, does it look to you like there might be, this should be observable on every tier that he goes up. Do they miraculously have an artifact that is that could be used as a crucible of observable? That would mean that, and there's some specific requirements for this one item here, like really specific, as we remember. It would have to be made of a material that withstands more heat than the material that the blocks are made of. Also, it would have to have like a perfectly carved out shape of a block within it, like to create a block. So it'd have to be a rectangle for sure. It would have to they'd have to be huge, and it would actually have to be able to offer the size of blocks that are coincidentally used on the pyramids for it to remain a potential. It would have to have a lid, and it would. Let's quickly notice that this is a list of very specific attributes that need to be observable. You have to have a perfect geometric interior that can provide a vitrified glaze to the exterior of a block. Also, the lids have to show manufacturing of air cavities in them to show that they might be able to float. And so that would be observable, and we should be able to see something like that. And that would go for all, there's a lot of pyramids made, so there should be a lot of these artifacts observable. And yeah, could we make a big pumice block that looks like they use on the pyramids, same size and everything? Does it look like it has air cavities? This all needs to be observable just from this one artifact for this to remain a potential. And so let's look at this together. I found this document here that says that the symbol of Pisces, the fish of the Nile, was carved on the lid of an Egyptian sarcophagi. Is there space below the king's chamber that looks like the floor could drop down to be an elevator to provide that cycling of pressure? This one even demonstrates that the floor is not connected to the walls. And this one shows you that there's spots that go down around 40 meters deep. And if you look at this is before they patched up the corner here. This was drainage. Now it's all patched up. But they used to be open. And I like this black and white You can see that there's a seam between the floors there when he walks in, demonstrating that they're not connected. This one is with the edges all patched up like a normal room. Doesn't look like a couple of blocks are brand new. They're so shiny. Obviously refinished. I mean, they got lights coming out of the wall. But they've had like renovations all throughout the last 100 years. What else? We could look at the words. Well shaft. This one says literally well shaft. Then the other one was girdle stones, air shafts, and then chamber. So looking up at the word chamber and then looking up at the word air chamber, I found a bunch of stuff that had to do with pumps. And the air chamber is considered a vertical shaft like an elevator. If I were you guys, I would pause all that and look at them one after the other. Was there any salt or water found inside the pyramids when they were discovered? It's passed a lot of extreme liquids and steam through them a bunch of times. I guess they're wear and damage, and that would be observable. Does the front entrance look like it spewed a bunch of steamy hot water out of it many times? Is it also molted and like it's had a lot of steam being pumped through the front door? Do the granite blocks look like they have a vitrified crust on the exterior and look like the interior might still be pumice, as well as the exterior row of the pyramid to suggest that it may be holding in water? Are they clamped together so those smooth faces can't, move apart from each other? That would also be, have to be observable. Also, if it was a pressurized hydro pump and, that was full of pressure, that would mean that the architecture of it would have, especially in large cavities, would have to be able to accommodate that kind of pressure. So they would have fortification of architecture to accommodate that kind of excess stress and pressure on those specific areas. That would have to. And if it was a pressure cooking thermal pump distiller, not only would it have to have that architecture to accommodate those the giant pumping pressure of steam and all that force, but the entire structure itself would have to, be capable of as a containment unit to hold in all that pressure. Like its exterior would have to, does it look like it'd be capable of being a containment unit? The entire structure would have to provide some kind of exterior rigidity to be able to hold in that entire force, maybe with a lot of weight and, like it basically would have, does it look like it could be a containment unit? That would have to be observable for sure. And let's say it had a breach, is there, and blew up or something, like one of those pressure cookers, like like it had a breach. Maybe there's some pyramids out there that have been blown, that look like they've been blown apart from the inside out, like that failed. That might be something to look at. Also, reason and logic. I mean, if I was building a pyramid, I would float the blocks. I thought about putting bamboo or coconuts in my cement to make it float. I'm sure ancient Egyptians were as smart as me. Romans made their own self-healing concrete. That's pretty advanced technology. Let's go to Japan. See these megalithics here? They've got this one here. It's called the floating stone. This one here is called the rock ship. And this one here is called the stone that floats. I mean, you don't really need to reach very far. These are the names that they've given these stones. I mean, like, you know, like, let's, you know, just read between the lines. Reasonable to believe that ancient Egyptians would have quarried these stones from 800 kilometers away and, you know, used 3 different types of stones for no reason. And when they could have just used one stone, I mean, they would have had to need 3 different types of stones specifically for a purpose, or they would have just used one stone. Does it seem logical that it would just be a tomb? I mean, people did seem proud to work on the pyramids. It was a big effort, a big joint effort, and they got the finished product. I mean, there must have been a big need for this. So is it logical? What would you do? Do you think it seems logical? Do the little air shafts look like they've passed a lot of steam and been under pressure a lot? Also, if it was pumping fresh water out of its exterior air shafts, I mean, they wouldn't let that, like, this is what the purpose of it is, to make fresh water, so they would have, like, really, say, taken care of that water. They would have made its own canal for it. They would have had filtering rooms for it, you know, cooling rooms, whatever. They would have definitely pampered that water once it was, you know, created. You know, does it look like there was, you know, special rooms and special canals and waterways designed specifically to capture and segregate this water? You know, they wouldn't let it pour back into the dirt, you know what I mean? If it were actually making fresh water, they'd take good care of it once it came out. So that should be observable. Also, there should be, like, if there was a pressurized pump, there would be, you know, and they had fortified architecture to accommodate that pumping, that cycling of up and down pressure. I mean, is there evidence of maybe pressure cracks or fractures in the material that could suggest or support the, you know, the notion of a cycling of up and down pressure, like a back and forth, you know, damage of some kind that would support this as evidence? Also, if it was desalinating seawater, I mean, it would have to have canals below it, tunnels that would be connecting the bottom of the pyramid or plateau to the Mediterranean, so that they could get that water to the pyramid complex. So that has to be present and observable. Also, it should easily be able to be seen from the geology from space. Like, is there a freshwater deposit nearby? Is there a salt deposit nearby? That would have to be observable. I mean, go together, it's cause and effect. And, you know, does it look like maybe the Nile might have been related to the pyramids? Is there any documentation suggesting that the two were connected in some way? I mean, I know that the Nile runs from south to north, but, you know, it looks like, looking at it, that it ran from north to south originally. Looking at it, gets fat at the top, gets thinner and thinner. I mean, maybe the pyramids made the Nile. I mean, looking at the geology, you see death, no life, and then freshwater, greenery, life. So death, no life, and then life. If you look at the Nile Basin, we got the greatest world salt deposit in history. The world's greatest salt deposit on one side of the basin wall enclosure, and right on the other side is fresh water. So you got super saline water on one side of the enclosure, and then fresh water right on the other. That doesn't seem like nature would create some kind of environment scenario like that, you know, does it look like maybe, you know, maybe it used to be a mystery where the source of the Nile was. Maybe the
Pyramids made the Nile. Is that
possible? You know, that's something to look into. Also, a profound question to ask ourselves, if they were a desalination operation. I mean, this is far more obsessively massive of an operation needed for a singular individual location, like a single kingdom. I mean, that's more fresh water than you need. Like, what would be the need for something, such a huge operation of desalination going on? You know, that's a big question to ask. Also, if they were making their own stones, let's say they were making their own stones, had volcanic heat somehow, and were able to pour their own pumice granite blocks, that would mean that basically the environment of desalinating seawater below ground creates a crystal like in that environment called cinnabar, which is like a red crystal. And you'd be flashing, you'd be melting the cinnabar because it would be it would be one of the stones that would be coming up the well. So you'd be, and basically to desalinate seawater into fresh water is the same process as to create mercury from cinnabar. You just capture the steam of cinnabar and that's mercury. It's as easy as that. But looking at the pyramid, I don't see mercury making it all the way up, even in steam, making it all the way up to these little tiny tunnels. So you'd figure that mercury would kind of be stuck in the lowest basin of the structure, like probably at the subterranean chamber. There would be a deposit of mercury. Did we find mercury at the bottom of these pyramids? Is there other pyramids that might have found deposits of mercury? You know, is there, you know, is this observable in other locations? Because that would have to be observable. There's no other way to, you know, about it. This would be cause and effect. Also, mercury wouldn't be by itself. It would be because you're flashing seawater with volcanic heat, with all these minerals and elements, that you'd be creating these really exotic metalloids that aren't typically found in nature at all, and they would be accompanying, you know, the mercury as well. Like, it would be residue. So they would have to have some, you know, exotic metalloids accompanying the mercury as well. So is that observable? Is there locations around the world near these sites that have mercury deposit and, you know, exotic metalloids accompanying them? You know, that would be definitely have to be observable, because that is cause and effect if this was a potential. Another thing is that there's pyramids all over the world. We got Peru pyramids, South America. We got, you know, Thailand temples are like pyramids, Chinese pyramids, African pyramids, Italian pyramids. Am I telling you that every pyramid desalinates water? I mean, there's a pyramid right beside this one in Egypt on the plateau that has a totally different interior than the one we just reviewed. Am I telling you that that pyramid desalinates water as well? Well, if we look closely, we can see that there is a basin within the tunnels, and that there's a split in these rooms with a tunnel above to let the steam up and the tunnel below to let the salt and water down. Steam goes up, salt goes down. That's the way. And, you know, now Peru pyramids are a little bit different in what they do, but the stones really look similar as far as engineering or homemade. They do look like homemade stones. Is more like one of those coffee makers, the pressure cooking distilling coffee makers. The ones where you put the grain in the middle and you boil the water beneath it, and it forces through the grain and then comes out the big pyramid as coffee. They have a little pyramid inside a bigger pyramid, and in between them they have rubble of stone and rock and sand and stuff, and the steam goes out of the little pyramid and it gets forced through these stones, and all the salt gets trapped within the rubble. and then any steam that makes it out of the big pyramid into the exterior, the outside, would be fresh water. And if their floor or ground is paved like Thailand temples and Hindu temples, Krishna temples, they all have an enclosure with a paved floor so that to keep the water, like it's a water fountain. They're fountains. They're like making a pool. Like this is what they would have to have. That would be observable too. So I even asked the internet what kind of stone and rubbles were found between these pyramids of South America, and they told me it was some type of stone called adobe stone. So I went and looked at adobe, the information that I received.
Well, if this pyramid really was passing like air and steam and salt water at high pressures like that, then surely every single tunnel would have like molted edges, at least a little, especially like the rooms where there's huge pressure, and there's some pretty sharp edges in this room here. So I mean, surely if it truly was passing that kind of pressure, there should be some evidence of like that kind of wear and tear. Like this tunnel should have like the lower part of the tunnel would be passing salt water, and the upper part of the tunnel would be passing air, or steam. Steam would leave like a bit of a dark, molted finish to the granite, and salt water would like kind of erode the bottom to fresh, to like cleaner eroded, like it would be whiter rock on the lower half. So looking at these tunnels, that's sort of what we see. Now the Queen's Chamber has this really amazing arch around the niche, and looking closely you could kind of see how it used to be eroded, and it's got refinished probably for people's safety. But it does show the potential of having, it's observable that it could have been heavily molted before it got fixed. And there's other parts of the pyramid that look patched up, like there's that patch up the spots that would be really worn down. And it's observable that they could have been worn down before. So, it's observable. So after the pyramids, I reassessed everything, all this new information in my mind, noticing that the model is really dependent on this new technology. Not new technology, it's simple technology we believe that they didn't have. The convergence of light, so that was going to answer many mysteries at once if I could actually get confirmation of that. The solar foundry thing, that would really explain a lot of mysteries in one shot. And as well as floating stones. That would also explain a lot of mysteries at once. So these two were sensibly, my biggest suspects. Another lead I was going to pursue is that if they all doing the same work with the well to be a successful location, because there's only one way to make a location, then that means they're all doing the same job. And so I was going to look at all these independent cultures and see what else they had similar with each other, as in that they independently discovered. That I figured if they're all doing the same job, anything else that is independently the same might be related to that job as well. I figured to make pumice takes extraordinary heat, so there must have been a simpler way, and there's many simpler ways to make stones float that don't need extraordinary heat. As well as to convert sunlight into a focal point that hot, you need a lens. And then I thought, how to make a lens without a lens? How did they get the first convergence of light? So like the early man, how did early man make stones float, and how did early man get the first convergence of light? And I thought that shouldn't be too difficult to solve, because they have no tools. They just have fire, earth, water, and air. And so that narrows down the possibilities a lot on how they could get convergence of light, only using nature to converge sunlight into a focal point. And so I cracked my brain on this a little bit, and I came up with a couple of solutions.
First of all, for making stones float, they all had potteries at the beginning of time. You put a pot upside down inside your cement that we all know they were pouring. You've got an air cavity in there, and that'll make stones float. It's super easy, super simple. We could do it right now. And you know, if we look at the word of pottery, like a vessel, a ship, a vase, and I looked at old ancient vases. Some supporting, I mean, we would have thought, we'd think of this again, putting a vase inside, like, you know, the diving bell, water won't fill inside, cement's too heavy to fill up the vase, it's upside down in your mold, you let the concrete harden, boom, you've got yourself an air cavity in there. They all had pottery, and that's pretty easy, like, we would have thought of this, moving big stones would have made us think of this pretty quick. Especially if we were waist deep in saturated salt solution. How to get first convergent. I thought about it a lot. First idea was to find like a large piece of a clear ice and shave it into a lens. And you know, you could get a focal point with that. And if you had it on top of a mountain where it stayed cold all day or never dropped below, you know, got too hot, it would not melt, and you could use it as long as it stays solid. But that didn't involve a well, so I thought about it more and came up with vibration of water in a shallow pool. Vibration of the water on surface tension at a certain frequency will mimic the Fresnel lensing pattern and will actually converge light into a focal point. So there you go. Hey, maybe they're like pottery can be made in a fire. You can make them all different shapes. You put your ingredients that you want to smelt into the pottery, and then you see these little tiny handles on all these potteries from different cultures all over the world. Has these tiny little loops that you can't even hold the pot like that, and it'd be so uncomfortable to carry or drink from, and you can't even put your finger in them, most of them. So I thought maybe these are the ones that they're hanging in the water at the bottom of the shallow pool while they're converging the focal point onto the pottery. And what happens, the focal point only heats the item targeted as a whole. And, you know, get a lens out of that. And you take it out, crack the pot open, and whatever shape you made the bottom of your pottery would be the shape of the lens you made. So there you go. First lensing idea. But then I thought maybe a lensing idea wasn't the first idea. Maybe first it was trying to get the water just to steam so that you could get fresh water, because that's what they really want. And so if you put like a rock at the bottom of the pool in the center and you did the same Fresnel effect, you know, get the town to chant or ohm to a certain frequency, then get the water to vibrate at that specific Fresnel pattern. It would converge the light to that point, and that's where you put a big boulder, and that boulder would get red hot because it targets the material. And once it's red hot, it would get that thing boiling. Then I found this ancient site that's like 15,000 years old. It's older than Göbekli Tepe, and they found the oldest pottery ever found in history. And if we look at these closely, I realized that they had a potentially supporting you know, features to them to the model that I just developed. And I thought, wow, this is really kind of ironic. And like that stone with that hole in it possibly could not be used as a bowl. That would be ridiculous. It's like, that's your bowl, or where you eat your soup from. And then if you look at their actual big pottery that they made on the right side, some of them have loops, and a lot of loops are broken, but they all have them. And some of these pots are actually an entire boulder that has been carved into a pot. So it was like a huge stone at first, and now it's like actually been hollowed out. Gave me the idea that the ones on the left were to steam the shallow well with and make fresh water. Ultimately leading me to the Pantheon as a condenser, like the bowl, upside down bowl with a hole in it, is a perfect way to capture a condenser. You recapture the steam and it makes fresh water. It gathers all the fresh water, and and Heliocheminus, which was shaped the same way. This demonstrated to me a potential, possibility of the very first understanding of converged light humanity gained, and this would have stemmed as our understanding and technology of light manipulation grew, so did our structures and our techniques and our types of observations would be available. So we'd study this because it would actually show what effects of and phenomena of nature. I believe this to be a good potential for the birth of solar desalination through distillation, solar foundry metallurgy, smelting, alchemy, metallurgy, masonry, and would have been at the forefront of human interest for thousands of years. Since the well was capable of providing all necessary fundamental needs for survival from location, it could have been the primary forefront of interest and focus of humanity, and would have been the most desired information. Even till today.